They always whisper the same thing in the hallway. It's time. But what if you could know the signs before that final breath is near? When I first walked into the hospice care wing, I didn't know that I'd be watching time unravel in slow motion. Each room had its own quiet rhythm, some filled with silence, others echoing soft classical music, a few whispering prayers that clung to the air like mist. Hospice nurses. They aren't just caregivers. They are timekeepers of the end. They have seen more goodbyes than most priests, more quiet smiles than most family albums can hold, and more dignity in death than many of us see in life. They say there are signs, 8 to be exact, that appear almost always before a person passes. These aren't just clinical symptoms. They are the language of the body winding down. But more than that, they are messages. Messages to the family, the friends, the caretakers. Messages that whisper, prepare, it's almost time. I remember sitting by Mrs. Eleanor's bedside. She was a retired school teacher who once had over 500 students. Her room was lined with thank you cards, old photographs, and a faded chalkboard that her granddaughter had brought in just to remind her of the classroom. Her laughter had grown faint, her appetite nearly gone. She was showing what nurses call the first sign, withdrawal from the world. Eleanor, once so sharp and curious, no longer asked what day it was. She didn't ask about the weather. Her words were shorter, her eyes focused far off. Not because she didn't care anymore, but because her body and soul were beginning to say goodbye. Withdrawal is often subtle. First, it's sleeping more. Then it becomes not responding when someone enters the room. They aren't ignoring you. Their energy is being redirected internally. Their body is preparing. I remember another man, Joseph, a war veteran, strong-willed, stern, rarely smiled. On his last days, he began seeing people no one else could see. He'd reach for them, talk to them. "Do you see her? The nurse in blue? She's right there," he'd say with certainty, pointing at an empty corner. Hallucinations, you might think, but hospice nurses call it something else, a spiritual vision, the second sign. And strangely, these visions almost always bring peace, not fear. Patients describe seeing mothers, long-lost friends, even children they lost in infancy. They're not afraid. They smile. Nurses don't question it anymore. They've seen it too many times. You see, there's a sacredness in those final days, a quiet truth that science doesn't fully explain. Then comes the third sign, changes in appetite. This one is so misunderstood by family members. "You have to eat," they plead, "just a bite." But the dying no longer need the same energy. The body isn't fighting for longevity, it's transitioning. Eleanor refused even her favorite peach cobbler. Joseph sipped water less and less. It's not giving up. It's not depression. It's biology. The body knows. And then there's the fourth sign, changes in breathing. This one catches people off guard. You might notice a rhythm change, long pauses, gasping, sometimes what's called Cheney-Stokes breathing, a pattern of deep breaths followed by shallow ones, and then silence. Families often panic. Is he gone? But then another breath, and then another. It's haunting, yes, but it's part of the process. The lungs are easing out, like waves pulling back from the shore. There's a young nurse named Clara who told me once, "When they start breathing like that, I hold their hand, not to comfort them, but to anchor them, so they know someone is still here." Isn't that beautiful? By now, families begin to understand. Visitors thin out. The room becomes more sacred. Time slows. The fifth sign is mottled skin. It often begins in the feet or hands, purple, blue, or blotchy patches. Circulation is slowing. Blood is staying close to the core. Sometimes the hands feel colder, and yet the room is warm. The body is choosing where to keep the last of its fire. And then comes restlessness, the sixth sign. Joseph began pulling at his sheets. Eleanor whispered nonsense phrases like, "Pack the shoes," and "We'll miss the train." It's confusing, sometimes agitating, but hospice nurses recognize it. They know the mind is shifting between planes. It's not our reality anymore. It's theirs. There's a kind of poetry to it all. The dying often speak in metaphors. "It's time to go," they say. Or, "They're waiting for me." These aren't just words. They are transitions. Just like a child learning to speak says up to mean love. The dying find a new language. Brief, symbolic, ethereal. The seventh sign is urinary changes. Less output, darker color. The kidneys are slowing. Again, not something to fear, but something to understand. Hydration doesn't stop it. IVs won't reverse it. It's simply the body closing shop, drawer by drawer. And the final sign, the eighth, is altered consciousness. This is when Eleanor stopped responding. Her eyelids fluttered. Joseph looked past me, not through me. They were both still breathing, but no longer here in full. They were between. Nurses speak softly during this time, not because they're being reverent, but because they know hearing is the last sense to go. That's why people say, tell them you love them, not for closure, for connection. Because even if they don't answer, they hear you. Let me take you back for a moment to the day Eleanor passed. It was a rainy Tuesday. The window was open just an inch. A wind chime her son had hung was barely moving. And then it stopped. Her breath had faded into the rain. There was no alarm, no flashing light, just a long sigh. Her daughter whispered, "Thank you for being my mom." And in that moment, the room wasn't filled with death. It was filled with peace. Hospice nurses don't just witness this once or twice. They see it every day, and still they cry. They don't become numb. They don't get used to it, but they do learn to recognize the signs, not as something to fear, but as sacred footprints in the sand before the tide rises. So why do we share these stories? Because families deserve to know. Because death shouldn't arrive as a stranger. It should be something we recognize, something we walk with, hand in hand until the end. And maybe that's the purpose of these signs. Not to warn us, but to prepare us, to give us just enough time to say the things we need to say, to hold a hand, to hum a favorite song, to remind them they are not alone. In the end, dying is not just a medical process, it's a deeply human one, a moment where stories come full circle. And for the nurses who stand witness each day, it is nothing short of sacred. If you've made it this far, thank you. You now carry the knowledge that so many wish they had in their final days with a loved one. Maybe now, when the time comes, you won't just be a witness, you'll be a guide, a comfort, a hand to hold in the dark, and maybe, just maybe, that makes all the difference.